Hey, imagine you're a freelancer who just got a massive client project, a 3D animation that's going to run for hours, layers of complex simulations, and a deadline that feels like a ticking bomb. You sit down at your current desktop, open the file, and watch the progress bar crawl. It's a gut punch moment because you know you could have avoided the frustration if you'd invested in a proper workstation from the start. The thing is, these high-end rigs aren't cheap, and it's easy to waste money on a machine that looks powerful on paper but doesn't actually fit your workflow. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So let's break down the HP Z6G5 with the Threadripper PRO 7955WX, 32GB of RAM, a 1TB SSD, and a 16GB NVIDIA card. I've spent a few weeks digging through specs, watching a handful of professional benchmarks, and reading the chatter in forums where creators discuss what actually matters when you're pushing workloads like CAD, VFX, or scientific simulations. Below is the honest rundown of who will truly benefit from this machine and who's better off looking elsewhere. First off, the biggest draw is the AMD Threadripper PRO 7955WX. This is a 16-core, 32-thread beast built on the Zen 4 architecture, and it's designed for workstation-class reliability. In real-world terms, that means you can keep 8-track video timelines open, render a full 4K frame in Premiere while simultaneously running a physics simulation in Blender, and still have headroom for background tasks like transcription or AI model inference. If your day-to-day involves juggling multiple heavy applications, this CPU's multi-thread performance translates to smoother multitasking and significantly shorter render times. But raw core count isn't the only factor. The Z6G5's motherboard supports up to 8 PCIe 4.0 lanes and has a hefty power delivery system, which keeps the Threadripper stable under sustained loads. For people who run long, unattended renders overnight, that stability is a crucial, often overlooked, piece of the puzzle. The downside is that the system's power consumption can push 500 watts at peak, so you'll need a quality PSU and an adequately ventilated workspace. If you're planning to keep this in a cramped home office without proper airflow, heat could become a silent performance killer, forcing you to throttle down or invest in aftermarket cooling. Memory is another practical consideration. The base model ships with 32GB of DDR5 RAM. For many creative professionals, 32GB is a comfortable sweet spot. You can handle large Photoshop files, video edit projects, and moderate 3D scenes without swapping. However, if you regularly work with massive point cloud datasets or high-resolution medical imaging, you may quickly hit the 32GB ceiling. Upgrading to 64GB or even 128GB is possible, but the cost rises steeply because you'll need matched DIMMs and possibly a BIOS update. So, ask yourself how data-intensive your typical workflow is before deciding if the base memory is enough. Storage-wise, the 1TB NVMe SSD gives you snappy boot times and fast asset loading. The Z6G5 also supports additional SATA 600 drives, meaning you can add a high-capacity HDD or another SSD for archiving older projects without sacrificing speed for your active work. In practice, I've seen creators store their current project files on the NVMe drive and dump completed renders to a secondary SATA drive, keeping the primary disk free for the next task. The catch: the internal drive bays are not toolless, so swapping drives isn't as quick as on some boutique workstation chassis. If you like swapping drives often, you might need to allocate a few minutes for each change. Graphics performance comes from the NVIDIA RTX 6000 series with 16GB of VRAM. This card is built for professional workloads, offering certified drivers for CAD and DCC applications. In practical terms, you'll see smoother viewport navigation in Maya, faster GPU-accelerated denoising in Blender cycles, and better handling of large textures in Substance Painter. For video editors, CUDA-based render engines will benefit from that VRAM when dealing with high-resolution footage. The upside is clear: if your pipeline relies on GPU acceleration, this card is a genuine productivity boost. However, the RTX A6000 is overkill for pure office tasks. If you're only doing 1080p video editing or light photo retouching, a consumer-grade RTX 3060 would suffice and save you a few $100s. One of the less obvious strengths is the HP Z6 Smart by firmware, which essentially means the workstation can push AI-driven optimizations for power and thermal management. In day-to-day usage, the system will dynamically adjust clock speeds and fan curves based on workload, keeping noise down when you're on a video call or crunching numbers. This is a subtle but welcome feature for anyone who needs a relatively quiet environment, like a home studio. The trade-off is that you lose a bit of manual control. Power users who want to lock the CPU at a specific boost frequency might find the automatic scaling limiting. Now, who should you really consider buying this machine? If you're a freelance visual effects artist, a small studio that needs a reliable go-to rig for rendering, a data scientist dealing with large models, or an architect who runs intensive simulations, the Z6 G5 hits the sweet spot between raw horsepower and workstation grade.